welcome to Broken Grounds video series. I'm Kareen, and today I want to talk to you about comfrey and making comfrey tea. So those of you who are familiar with permaculture have probably heard about comfrey, but for those of you who don't know about comfrey, comfrey is an herbaceous plant and it's a multifunctional plant, and we use it a lot in permaculture. It's both medicinal, it attracts beneficial insects, you use it as a mulch, you can use it as a catalyst or to jumpstart your compost, and of course you can also use it to make comfrey tea, which becomes a liquid fertilizer for plants in your garden. And remember, in permaculture we're always trying to work towards closed loop systems. So we want to import less and less on our property year after year. So instead of having to go out and buy, say, some kind of natural fertilizer for my tomatoes, if I grow comfrey, I don't need to do that. So year after year, you're using and wanting to use more and more plants in your garden that you grow to boost your fertility, to build your soil, and to grow your food. So comfrey is a perfect plant for this. So once again, we're in my food forest. There is a plum tree just right above me, and what I try to do in the design of my food forest is I plant a comfrey plant next to each one of my fruit trees in order to feed that tree. So comfrey has a lot of beneficial nutrients in it. It has the NPK, so the nitrogen, the phosphorus, and the potassium. And it accumulates those, and in addition to a lot of other trace elements and nutrients that plants need. So we use comfrey both in a perennial food forest system like this, but we can also use it in our garden. And I have such an abundance of comfrey here in the food forest that I use it both for the trees, and then I'll harvest some of it and I will make this comfrey tea that I'll use to feed my tomato plants, my pepper plants, my winter squashes, some of the heavier feeders in my garden. So just to let you know, what do you do to make a comfrey tea? So first off, you want to get a 5-gallon bucket, and you want some tools, of course. So this is one of my favorite tools in the garden. It is called a Japanese rice knife, and if you have perennial plants, and especially if you have a lot of comfrey, it makes it really easy to cut back your comfrey. And then you want a pair of pruners, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and cut back this comfrey plant and then show you the next step as to what you would do. So I'm gonna go over here, and as you can see, it's a very huge plant. So for now, I'm just going to cut some of the leaves to the ground, but comfrey gets pretty huge, and this is the first growth. So I would cut back this entire plant, and I'm going to put some of it in this 5-gallon bucket to make comfrey tea, and the rest of the leaves, I'm going to chop them up, and I'm going to throw them as mulch around my plum tree. So that will contribute nutrient to the soil and prevent me from having to bring in any additional inputs into my system. So you just take all of these leaves, these amazing comfrey leaves, and you can see right here the flowers that are on it. So the bumblebees love the comfrey. So I sort of hate to cut it down this time of year, but sometimes I leave it up for a little bit so the bumblebees and other native pollinators can benefit from it, and then I'll cut it back around this time. And then I just take it and with my pruners just kind of cut up the leaves. And you don't have to cut them into super small pieces, but enough kind of to fit into the 5-gallon bucket. And you can also add the stalks. So you just kind of stuff it into this 5-gallon bucket. And I usually fill it halfway or 3/4 of the way. put it in here. And then one thing that I forgot to mention is you are going to want a rock, some kind of rock, because you want to weigh the leaves down, and then you're going to fill it with water. So you're going to fill this up until it's completely full with water. And then what you're going to do is you're going to actually leave this to steep for 2 weeks. And so it gets pretty smelly. I'm not gonna lie, it does not smell good. You do wonder whether this is benefiting your plants, but indeed it will. But you're gonna leave this for 2 weeks. So then also, in addition to that, to keep pests out or anything, or breeding mosquitoes or anything in this water, you are going to cover this very lightly. Don't tamp down one of the tops to the 5-gallon bucket, but you will just cover it lightly, so that you don't have to smell the delicious smell as it's kind of breaking down. So within 2 weeks, it's going to become kind of this smelly, gooey, mucilaginous water, so to speak. And what you're going to do is you dilute this 1 to 2 usually. So I'll take some of this, pour it into my watering can, and then I'll dilute it the rest with water, and then I'll go ahead and I'll use this in and fertilize my tomatoes with it. And then with the leaves, the kind of gooey leaves that are left in the bottom, I'll just add those to the compost pile, or I'll throw them around one of my fruit trees. I'll come back here and I'll throw them around one of my fruit trees. So again, this is a really great way to grow fertility and to build your soil, and to use existing plants that you have in your garden in order to give you that fertility, rather than having to buy it or bring it in from elsewhere. So there are other options too, if you don't want to wait the 2 weeks, in terms of being able to use this Comfrey, and I will include some of that in the comments in terms of what else you can do, or how else you can do it so that it isn't this gooey, smelly mess. But this is one of the most effective ways where you're going to draw out the most nutrients and take most advantage of the Comfrey. So again, if you don't have Comfrey in your system, I would highly recommend that you have it. It does get rather big, so just be aware that in this climate, it has this massive vegetative spring growth at the beginning of the season. So, and it does spread. So just be conscious of where you put it in your garden space. So I wouldn't put it right in the middle of your annual garden beds. Figure out kind of a perennial area where you maybe already have some perennial flowers where you could possibly put it. Or of course, if you have a food forest system, then you can also just grow it in your food forest, and then take it back to your annual garden when you need it for fertility. So if you are local, I have a bunch of Comfrey, so if you need some extra, I'm happy to give some to you. So get in touch about that. But again, a great plant to add to your system, and many different ways that you can use Comfrey, and I highly recommend that you add it. Let me know if you have any questions, and I look forward to seeing you soon.